So I'd like to start today's talk with a story about when I first started tattooing. I'm an artist and a tattoo artist, an author, and last night I gave a talk, so I think I'm a public speaker now. Maybe I earned a status, who knows? So I don't normally start out these kind of talks talking about tattooing, but I had this story and I thought I had so much packed into this short little story that it sort of tied in with what I wanted to speak to you guys about. So I've been tattooing for 30 years, and when I was about a year into tattooing, I heard about this tattoo convention and I thought I really want to go. And so I called the event organizer and get him on the phone. He's this gruff old biker, and I said, I want to come and tattoo at your convention. He goes, well, what's your shop name? I said, Ned's Needles. Terrible business name. Wouldn't recommend putting needles in your name, even for a tattoo business. But so he goes, Ned's Needles, I never heard of you. Are you a scratcher? So a scratcher is somebody who just tattoos in their home and they're not really trained. So I'm like, no, I have a space set up in my house that I tattoo from. And well, who taught you? And I said, well, I'm learning on my own. And he goes, well, you're a scratcher then. So I'm like, yeah, maybe. So I sort of bargained with him. I said, look, why don't I come and show you my work? And if I'm good enough, then you let me tattoo at your show. And if not, I'll just spectate. And he had said throughout the conversation, maybe it's better you just come spectate. You know, you only have a year in, you might pick up some things just being in the audience. But he agreed to meet with me. So I'm by London, I drive up to Guelph at the time we agreed upon, and I pull his tattoo shop door open, and he and his wife are having a knockdown, drag-out fight. They're screaming at each other, and I'm like, oh crap, this is a bad time. So I open the door, and I poke my head in, and I kind of looking around. I said, I'm Ned, maybe come back another time. He's like, no, come on in, go sit down. And his wife was like just fuming mad that I kind of interrupted the argument. Not that they were getting very far in the argument they were having. So I sit on the couch, and his wife storms out of the shop, and he takes my portfolio and he's violently flipping through the pages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to rip these pages right out of the book. He's got the fight all over him, right? And then he stopped and he just flipped it back to the start and started going slow. And I'm like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And he closes the book up and he says, Ned, how long have you been tattooing for? I said, a year, a full year. 365 days. We're counting days at this point. So he said, gives me my portfolio back, and he said, well, this convention's for people like you. I'm like, oh, okay. So he said, I want you to come tattoo at the convention. And I said, oh, okay. So he gives me a registration package, and he says, fill this out, pay for your booth, send me a check in the mail, and you got your spot. So I'm driving home, and the registration's sitting on the seat beside me, and I keep looking at it and like, oh my God, what have I done? The gravity of this decision that I've made is hitting me now. There's going to be 50 Canadian tattoo artists at this show, and every one of them is going to know that I don't know what I'm doing. And see, that was my problem. I was 18 at the time of this story, and back then I was so insecure. My insecurities would elicit so much mental activity in my mind. My insecurities, by the time I had driven from Guelph to Ingersoll, where I was living, my insecurities got so big that I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to go tattoo. I'm just going to. He was right. I should just spectate at this. So I just kind of got home, put the registration off to the side. 2 weeks later, he calls me up. He said, Ned, where's your registration? Oh yeah, about that. I said, I think you were right. I should just come spectate. You know, I don't know, I'm ready for this. And he says, no, you're not. Get your registration in. You're tattooing at the show. I said, okay, yep, no problem. We get off the phone, click, yep, screw that. Nope, I'm not doing that. And it was now another week passes, and we're about a week from the show. Calls me up again. Ned, where is your registration? Did you mail that? Yeah, no, I didn't mail it. Sorry. He says, I said, I don't know that I'm ready for this. He says, you're ready, you're coming. Look, I'm going to give you the booth for half price. And you pay me at the end of the weekend if you make money. So I'm like, okay, now I'm really on the hook to do this thing. And there's no getting out of it. And I realized that if I didn't show up, I'd be disrespecting him. And so now I felt like I had to go. So I was still definitely afraid. I was extremely scared to do this. And my insecurities were just taunting my mind. And I thought, how am I going to get there? How am I going to do this? And so what I resolved that I just needed to, when the day came, I needed to put my stuff in the car. That was the first step. And then once all my gear was in the car, I guess I'm driving to Guelph. I drove to Guelph. I get there, and I'm sitting outside the hall, and there's like vehicles all over with tattoo stuff on their vehicles, stickers. And I'm really afraid. I'm afraid to go in there. But I thought, okay, just take the first thing into the hall, pull the door open. And that's how I got through the whole weekend. I just, one thing at a time. But I'm going to pause this story, but I'm going to get back to it at the end of this talk. There's a few things I'd like to share about what I think that how important this story was for me. So where I want to go now is the talk that I'd written before this event. I wrote that I was going to talk about peace, talk about some of the veils that obscure our peace, and then talk about what happens after we wake up. We have an awakening, then what next? So I'll start with talking about peace. I want to ask you guys, is there anyone in this room that doesn't want peace? Anybody?
No.
Cheap brown. My mom always says, cheap brown. So I think it's one of those things that is so applicable and relevant, no matter who we are. If we're a construction worker, or if we're an energy healer, or a librarian, I think invariably we all search for peace. We want to be at peace. And for me, I thought for many years that my peace was really about making all the check marks on my life list. I thought that I would be at peace when I was happy. And that was a critical error for me, because happiness is an emotion. And at best, we stay happy. If we get something, we stay happy for a few minutes, days, weeks. Beyond that, it doesn't have the power to deliver us into peace. So what is peace? You know, it's my discovery of it is it's a place that lives inside of me. It's not something that I'm going to find outside of myself. My peace arises naturally in me. Now, what are the conditions that have to be in place for me to become aware of my peace? And that's where I'm going to talk about the veils. There's certain veils that cover up our ability to move into peace. The first veil is the veil of material. So this veil, and I wrote about this in my newest book called Awakening to Peace. I wrote about the veils, kind of like just a quick Reader's Digest version of what the veils are. And then in my book, Awakened, the reality of what is, I sort of unpacked the veils a little bit deeper. So the first veil, the veil of material. And I think that the masses, including myself, we've been trapped in this veil for a very long time. The veil of material is everything outside of you. Everything that we see and experience, the physical aspects of life. And this is the thing that was on the veil of material was pretty much all my check marks on my life list. I wanted a house and wanted a good job, and I wanted to fill my house up with stuff, and and this veil kept me always outside of myself, wanting something out here. The next veil is the veil of sense, body, emotions. So this veil is about, part of it's inside, what we feel, and part of it is how our senses draw us out into the outer world. Now the veil of emotion, sense, body, and emotions, it can be such a slippery veil to traverse. We so easily get caught up in what we feel. And what I see, the biggest problem with the veil of emotions and giving it all of our attention is that we identify with this veil as who and what we are. And in my experience, I think that's such a critical error. If an emotion rises in me, when I was younger, it was always anger. I wasn't really accustomed to allowing myself to go into other emotions. If an emotion rose up in me, I would say, I'm angry. So I become that veil. And in doing so, I'm not, there's no part of me that can lean back into my peace, the peace that lives in me, the same peace that lives in you. So you see how our attention, it just kind of, it goes outward. We're always looking outward, and our attention goes inward to what we feel, and then what we feel triggers the veil of the mind. And again, this is such a dense veil that keeps us so distracted. When I was with the Ashaya monks for a number of years, and during my time with the monks, I was with them for 8 years and became one for a year. And they taught me a great deal about the veil of the mind. The mind is this thing that will keep you distracted for this life and the next 30 if we don't learn how to lessen the density of that veil. So the veil of the mind is all about this inward thing that's going on in here. And in the veil of the mind, we think of our mind as we have thoughts and thinking, but they're all just kind of maybe lumped into one thing. The Ashaya monks taught me that thoughts are one thing, thinking is a complete other thing. And so a thought drops in, and then we grab onto it and think about it. And that's how the veil of the mind works. There's what I think is me talking, and there's what I think is, a thought dropping in, but I couldn't separate the two. Thoughts, thinking, it's all me. The Ashaya said, a good portion of your thoughts are not yours. And I'm like, nobody's putting thoughts in my head. And they said, watch them. And I'm like, okay, I'll watch my thoughts. They're my thoughts. They're not your thoughts. They come into your head if they're your thoughts. But that was the biggest problem. When I did watch the thoughts, I noticed that there was so many thoughts that were other people's words. There are things that people had said to me, and then there was a plethora of thoughts about things that happened in the past or things I wanted to happen in the future. And then if I mix my emotions into it, when I felt something, I would instantly go into my thoughts, especially if it was an unfavorable emotion coming up. It would sling me into thoughts, and then my thoughts would make me feel worse. So there I was for a good portion of my life, bouncing between what I felt, what I think, what I could see out here, what I wanted, my desires to, keep obtaining stuff, the material stuff. And it left no room for me to move into that space of peace. Now, if I were to ask you guys, where do we find peace inside of ourselves? Anybody? In the heart center?
Yeah, that's what I've done.
Anybody else? Just trying to put you on the spot there.
I'm thinking,
You're the big one.
probably my guts. Likely. I'd have to say me.
Mhm.
I always go with my gut feelings and things. They fooled me many times, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd more than likely your heart.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. When I turn inward toward the heart, to me, metaphorically, the heart is sort of just a doorway that leads us into the silent space in us. And that takes me to the last veil that I wanted to speak about. The veil that we think that we're separate from the divine. So I don't know, like in our side of the globe, that we were ever taught that there's a unity between me and the divine, or between me and God. There actually is no me. It is just one thing. It's the divine. But to experience that, to start moving into that as an experience, the first three veils kind of stop us from actually getting into having that experience. Now, we do have experiences with it. Maybe we're not conscious of it. When we see somebody, an old friend, and you give them a hug, and you're just filled right up. That's the divinity coming together between you and another person. That's you're demolishing the veil that we're separate from the divine, because if the divine lives in me, it lives in everyone. But again, for me, I had no experience. I didn't know myself outside of the context of what I thought, what I felt, and I was just too distracted in that. So we work at decreasing the veil of separation between us and the divine by spending less time in the veils, the first three veils that I spoke of. And that's the importance of, if we all want to get to this place of peace within us, that we start to look at how much of our time that we're placing, or how much time are we spending in our thoughts and our feelings, and how we can really get to that place of the peace in us. Now, peace to me is not the final destination. There's so much more to the depth of the silence in me, that peace is just sort of, it's kind of like what the heart is to the soul. It's sort of the thing that we pass through to get into the depth of the silence. Peace is not the destination. Rather, it's just a brief passing into the deeper aspects of who we are. And that leads me into the last topic that was for today. Is so we maybe start having some more peaceful moments in our life, or we have an awakening of some sort. And on the path, I think we have many awakenings. There's little ones, and sometimes we have really big ones. We'll maybe have a healing with somebody, or we'll read a book and it just kind of lights us up and makes us look at the world in a different way. Or what it's doing is it's shifting our consciousness. So after each time we have no matter how big or small the awakening is, our consciousness is just a little different. So we see the world just a little differently. We see ourselves a little different. And what's next for us after we start to have any amount of awakenings is that my path is, I thought when I woke up that the world would be like this bright, shiny globe, and I might start wearing robes or something and glowing, or I thought I'm going to wake up and I'm just going to be, everyone's going to know it. Like I'll walk by someone, whoa, who's that guy? He's awake. Why is he glowing? You know, you wake up and just life is, you're intensely happy, you're at peace, and you're never going to be angry again. No, that's not what it's like. And I think life shouldn't be like that. What's next after an awakening is that you actually get really on point with life itself. You get on point with what shows up in your day. What's next after an awakening is just total engagement of your life. Being present, you know, and I tell this story about my teacher all the time in Maharishi. He would say that he'd wake up in the morning and his head wasn't where his body was. So he'd wake up and his head would be at work, and he'd get to work and his head was already back home. He'd come home at the end of the day and his head was back at his workplace. And I use that metaphor all the time because it's so true. I would get up and live my days like I wanted to be somewhere else. I'd be in a lineup at the grocery store and I'd want to be at the front of the line. And once I got to the front of the line, I want to be in my car. I want the checkout lady or guy to just speed this stuff up. I've got places to go. So we wake up, and what's next is that we just settle into our lives. We accept and receive all the blessings that come to us. And we decrease the veils so that we can hear the voice of the silence when it speaks. The silent place in us where we really diminish the veil of that we're separate from the divine, that veil, it speaks. And it's actually the same thing that spoke to me the day that I decided I was going to go to that tattoo convention. So the moral of that story about going to the tattoo convention is the first thing I did right was I listened. I saw the advertisement for this show and I thought, oh, I'm going to go tattoo at that. I just listened, and that was an intuition, or it was sort of my purpose. My purpose arose in that moment, and I was brave enough to follow it. That was the first moral of the story, is that for one brief second, I listened. And that's the thing about the heart or the soul or the silence. It is constantly communicating with us. It's not biased. It doesn't wish for us to do things. It doesn't say, Ned, I really wish you would take me out and buy that new car. You know, it may come up and says, time for a car, you know. And maybe it's telling us that because the wheels are just about to fall off the one we own. The silence will just tell us all kinds of random stuff, and it may tell us to do something or not to do something, but it's not biased in that. So when the silence came up in me and and it said go to this tattoo convention, it was exactly what I needed to do. The second thing that I did when I went to that show is I got into the moment. Because I was so insecure, I was prone to listening to the voice in my head. When I set down that voice and I actually got into the moment, that's what helped get me there. And I think that's so relevant for being at peace with life, is that the mind will constantly present the problem. The mind will bring up your fears, and you'll feel those fears. But instead of me feeling the fear and continuing to go off in the dialogue of my mind, I was able to set down my fears, have courage. In place of fear, I inserted courage. And I was able to have that courage by being present and, breaking it up into small chunks. There's one point to the story that I left out. And the coolest part for me was when I went to this tattoo convention, they put me beside the best tattooist in the room. And the guy that I got to tattoo beside, his name was Mike Austin. And he had such a reputation in the industry, and he's somebody that, he was my idol. I looked up to him as a tattoo artist, and to me he was like a mortal god. And at this show, I'm the scratcher, the kid that doesn't know what he's doing, and I'm beside Mike. Why am I beside Mike? And what I found out later is that all the other artists in that room were pissed. They were so mad that why didn't they get to be beside Mike? Why did the event organizer put this kid beside Mike? And halfway through the show, I remember the band was playing and it was really loud, and I looked over to Mike and I said, "Music's loud, eh?" He goes, "No doubt." And in that moment, chills ran through my whole body. It like someone had just hooked me up at 220. And I realized that I had dreamed that. I dreamed that I literally had a dream that I was tattooing at a convention and a big time artist said those exact words to me, "No doubt, music's loud." So dreams come true. But sometimes we think that we have to, wish really hard for a dream for it to come true. We have to kind of just use our power of, what do they call that? Power of attraction or whatever, the law of attraction. Well, in this case, I had to chase my dreams, and I had been chasing them for quite a while. And that day when I turned around, my dreams were chasing me, which was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. When my dream actually came true in that moment. So life is so full of purposeful moments, and we get to those purposeful moments by learning how to decrease the veils, learning how to be courageous, and learning how to show up, bring your head and your body to the same place. We learn how to live our purpose and not really chase our purpose, because our purpose is always walking beside us. It's sitting right there with us. My purpose right now is here, and in 20 minutes it'll be somewhere else. And that's the thing, we never run out of it. And when we get to a life where we're just present, courageous, and letting go of our fears, letting go of the mind, I think peace just naturally follows. I think peace just kind of comes up on its own, because we're really getting the juice out of the squeeze. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on for a few minutes here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising one.